In the door, a hole. Not a keyhole, but a specially drilled opening. A peephole. On the other side, in the corridor, stands an SS officer. He does not blink. He looks at his watch. Tick, tock. 15 minutes, not a second more. Inside the room, on a narrow institutional cot, takes place what any normal person would call rape. But here, in the heart of the Nazi hell, it is called a bonus. It is called motivation. The woman on the bed has no right to make a sound. She is forbidden to speak. She is forbidden to show emotion. She is not a human being. She is a machine. A biological apparatus for releasing tension. And the man panting on top of her is not a lover, nor even a rapist in the usual sense. He is a slave whom the master is allowed to feel like a lord for a quarter of an hour. Time is up. The officer knocks on the door. Next, the assembly line must not stop. Behind that door is a queue of 300 men. And for all of them, only 10 women. Welcome to the dirtiest, most hypocritical, and most shameful secret of the Third Reich. A secret kept silent for almost 70 years because the truth was too uncomfortable for everyone. Today, we will descend to the very bottom of human morality. We will deconstruct, atom by atom, the scheme that turned the female body into currency and sexed into a tool of total control. You will learn how the Nazis, who screamed about blood purity and morality, became the largest-scale pimps in European history, and why the women who went through this hell considered themselves cursed for the rest of their lives, even though this very hell was what saved them. But to understand how humanity sank to such baseness, we need to rewind the tape. To 1939, Europe is in flames. The German war machine is grinding down borders, cities, and destinies. Millions are leaving for the front. Young, strong German men, full of testosterone, are torn from their familiar environments. They do not see their wives for months. They live in the mud of the trenches, in constant fear of death, and in the adrenaline frenzy of victories. And very soon, the Wehrmacht command faces a problem that cannot be solved by tanks or artillery barrages. Sexual hunger. This is not a metaphor. This is physiology. The lack of female society begins to hit the brain harder than enemy propaganda. Discipline falls. Soldiers become nervous, uncontrollable. Excesses begin in the occupied territories. But the most terrifying thing for Nazi ideologues is the threat of horizontal alliances within the army, homosexuality. In a world where masculine strength and brotherhood are cultivated, the line is very thin, and the command is panic-stricken that soldiers will start seeking warmth in each other. The Nazis are pragmatists. They don't preach sermons, they solve issues. A solution for the army is found quickly. Brothels are opened in the captured lands. French women, Polish women, residents of occupied cities. Aryan soldiers are serviced by specially selected workers. The generals exhale. Steam is let off. The war machine is lubricated and running smoothly. It would seem the issue is closed. But then, like a devil from a snuff box, a man appears whose name should be remembered solely to be cursed. Oswald Pohl. Pohl is not just a Nazi. He is the head of the SS main economic and administrative office. He is the chief quartermaster of the concentration camps. For him, people are not souls, not destinies, but lines in a ledger: debit, credit, balance, loss. He looks at the map of concentration camps and sees inefficiency. Prisoners are dying like flies. They work sluggishly. Sabotage, thoughts of escape, secret resistance cells, all this lowers output, and the Reich needs production. Pohl doesn't give a damn about suffering, but he cares about the numbers. And so, in his cold, calculating brain, an idea is born. Monstrous in its simplicity. Male prisoners also need a body, Pohl thinks. If we give them the opportunity to satisfy their instincts, we will gain a lever of pressure stronger than the fear of death. Pohl writes a note, a memorandum. No lyricism, just dry bureaucracy. I propose introducing a special incentive in the form of access to women. This will increase labor productivity. This will give us control. This note lands on Heinrich Himmler, S-table. Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust. A man obsessed with esotericism and racial purity reads it. And do you know what he does? He doesn't grimace. He doesn't speak of morality. He nods. Pohl's idea gets the green light. The project is launched. June 1942, Mauthausen concentration camp. It is here that a branch of hell on earth opens in a new format. The first camp brothel. The Nazis approached the matter with frightening pedantry. No spontaneity. Ruthless German mathematics calculated everything. Schedules, tables, and production quotas were drawn up. Think about these numbers. It was decided that 10 girls were enough to service between 300 and 500 men. Just imagine this assembly line. 10 women, 500 men. Pohl's calculations were based on a cynical assessment of the female organism's endurance. They calculated how many thrusts, how many minutes, how many calories needed to be spent so that the woman would die right on the bunk on the first day. It was exploitation on the brink of biological decay. And there was a rigid rule: if a girl broke, physically or mentally, if she stopped meeting the plan, she wasn't treated. She was returned to the general camp, and that was a one-way ticket. But where did they get this live merchandise? The main supplier became the female underworld, the Ravensbrück concentration camp. And here, another character enters our bloody drama, Maria Mandel. She was called the Beast, a camp commandant, a sadist who could beat a prisoner to death simply for a sideways glance. Personally handled the casting for the brothels. She walked along the ranks of emaciated, shaven-headed women and pointed her finger. She needed those who still retained some flesh on their bones. The most productive age, those who could withstand the load. Why did they agree, after all? They were asked formally. It was voluntary. The answer lies in the monstrous lie fed to these unfortunates. They underwent ideological processing. SS officers, looking into the eyes of skeletons in robes, said, "Serve the Reich for 6 months, work honestly in the special block, and we will let you go. You will return home. Freedom, a magic word. For the ghostly hope of seeing children, a husband, or a mother, women were ready for anything. Even for daily, multiple rapes, of course. No one intended to let them go. It was a carrot dangling before the nose of a donkey heading to the slaughterhouse. But hope dies last, and it was on this hope that the SS built its business. After the selection, the most surreal part began. The pre-sale preparation procedure. Prisoners who hadn't seen soap for years began to be washed. They were fattened up like cattle before an exhibition. They were injected with calcium to strengthen their bones. Their skin was scrubbed with special brushes, stripping away the camp filth. They were bathed in disinfectant tubs. They were even forced to tan under quartz lamps to give their skin a healthy hue. Imagine this contrast. Yesterday you were dying of typhus and hunger, and today you are fed meat and laid under a lamp. But behind this care hid cold calculation. The SS were panic-stricken by contagion. A German soldier from the guards or a valuable slave laborer must not catch a venereal disease. And there was one more procedure, the final touch: sterilization. The Nazis didn't need pregnant prostitutes. Pregnancy is downtime in work. It means extra mouths to feed. Therefore, before being sent to the brothel, women were surgically deprived of the ability to have children. Forever. It was done crudely on a conveyor belt, without anesthesia or with minimal pain relief. Their bodies were turned into empty vessels for male lust, and so the mechanism is launched. Mauthausen was the first, but not the last. The experiment was deemed successful, and brothels opened in Gusen, Buchenwald, Auschwitz, Dachau. 10 concentration camps acquired their own houses of tolerance. How did this affect the camp? Oswald Pohl's plan worked devilishly effectively. Firstly, labor productivity among the privileged prisoners actually increased. Animal instinct proved more powerful than class hatred. But the main thing was different. Pohl managed to split the unity of the prisoners. Visiting the brothel cost money, 2 Reichsmarks. For an ordinary prisoner who didn't even own his own hair, this was a cosmic sum. But for the camp aristocracy, the capos, the elders seers from among the inmates, those who worked in the kitchen or the warehouses, it was affordable. An elite emerged. Those who could buy a woman, and the rabble emerged. Envy began to corrode the barracks. Prisoners began to snitch on each other with redoubled vigor. Denunciations poured onto the commandant's desks. This one is planning an escape. This one cursed the Fuhrer. This one stole bread. People drowned their comrades to earn favor, get a reprieve, earn those bloody 2 marks, and buy themselves a ticket to the building with the red lantern. The camp underground was bursting at the seams. Solidarity was replaced by infighting. Pohl succeeded in creating the perfect system of self-regulating terror. But in this system, There was a caste of outcasts for whom the brothel doors were shut tight, even if they had millions of marks. Jews. This was a cast iron rule. A Jew had no right to touch a woman. There is a version that this was a personal order from Himmler. Even in the matter of utilizing human resources, the Nazis could not compromise their racial delusions. The Jew remained a subhuman, unworthy of even such a filthy privilege. And what about homosexuals? They were fought with particular cynicism. The Nazis believed that homosexuality in the camp was due to boredom and the absence of women. Therefore, some pink triangles, as gays were marked, were forcibly driven into brothels. This was called therapy. If a prisoner could not perform the act with a woman, it was regarded as sabotage of the treatment. But more often than not, the reason was even more banal: fear of disease. Homosexual contacts in the unsanitary conditions of the camp were a breeding ground for infection. Venereal diseases were a death sentence. If a prisoner was found to have syphilis or gonorrhea, he was subjected to forced, barbaric treatment with experimental drugs. If the result was negative, a bullet in the back of the head, no one intended to treat them for long or at great expense. Let's return to that room, to the peephole in the door. How did it happen technically? Over the years of the system's existence, according to various estimates, between 300 and 500 women passed through these 10 brothels. The figure seems small compared to the millions of victims, but for each of them, it was an eternity. 65% were Germans, so-called social elements. The rest were Polish women. The documents even list one Romanian woman. Production quota: 8 men per EV Enning. 8 every day, no weekends or holidays. For each client, 15 minutes. No romance. No foreplay. Conversation strictly forbidden. Any word could be a transfer of information. A password, a plea for help. Therefore, silence. Only the creaking of the bed and heavy breathing. Position, missionary only. The SS controlled even this. A step to the left, a step to the right. Punishment. In the doors, that very peephole, garrison soldiers, bored SS men, often turned duty at the brothel into entertainment. They watched, they commented. The girls knew they were being watched every second. Privacy did not exist. Humiliating. Absolutely. Shameful, yes. But here is the paradox that blows the mind. For the women in these brothels, living conditions were the best in the camp. They weren't beaten with whips on the parade ground. They were fed enhanced rations. They slept on clean sheets. They weren't shot for fun, against the backdrop of the horror happening on the other side of the special block. As fence, working as a prostitute seemed like salvation. A privilege. Statistics are a stubborn thing. Almost all the women who passed through the camp brothel survived. They survived the war. Pohl's system protected its inventory. As long as a woman could spread her legs, she had a right to life and food, and the lie about freedom continued to work. They were told, just a little longer, just a couple more months. And they believed, or forced themselves to believe so as not to go insane. 6 months passed, freedom did not come, but they remained in the brothel or were transferred to another camp to the same position. This hellish carousel spun until the very end. Until 1945. The brothels were closed and disbanded only when Soviet tanks or Allied troops were approaching the gates. The war ended. Nazism fell. The world was horrified by the gas chambers, the crematorium ovens, the mountains of corpses. But about the brothels, silence. Grave silence for decades. Why? Because it was a double taboo. First, it destroyed the image of pure evil. The Nazis appeared not just as executioners, but as calculating pimps doing business on the bodies of their victims. Every Reichsmark paid by a prisoner went into the SS treasury. Himmler and Pohl effectively became the main beneficiaries of the largest network of brothels in Europe. It was so vile that people didn't want to believe it. Second, the victims themselves remained silent. Imagine a woman returning home. How does she explain how she survived? Say, I serviced 8 men a day. Society was not ready to accept this. They would have been branded with shame. They would have been called German mattresses. The forced sterilization performed on them became their eternal curse. But it also helped hide the truth. No children, no questions. All kinds of human rights violations, including this criminal sterilization. would have cast a huge shadow on modern society if they had surfaced immediately. Therefore, the topic was buried deep in the archives. But, as they say, lies have short legs. The secret always becomes clear. The seal of secrecy was torn off only in 2009. The man who did it was historian Robert Sommer. Think about this number, 34 years. For 34 years, he collected information bit by bit. He searched for survivors. He dug through half-burnt SS documents. He reconstructed Pohl's accounting. His work is the fundamental monograph Das Bordell, the concentration camp brothel. These are 450 pages of pure concentrated facts that make the blood run cold. Sommer didn't just tell a story. He debunked myths. With documents in hand, he proved the Nazis did not fight prostitution. They led it. They legalized it for their own profit. He named all the names, all the dates, all the numbers. He showed how the regime used people's physical needs to manipulate them like puppets. And most importantly, he rehabilitated these women. Sommer proved the fact of violent coercion. He showed that conditions were created where engaging in this shameful business became the only alternative free way for prisoners to survive. It wasn't a choice. It was a form of torture, stretched out in time. Sommer's book produced the effect of an exploding bomb, but the explosion was muffled. Society is still reluctant to talk about this topic. Too much dirt. Too difficult to wrap one's head around the fact that the reward for good work in a death camp was sex. The story of Camp Brothels is a mirror, a crooked, dirty mirror in which the entire essence of Nazism is reflected. Not the pompous speeches of Goebbels, not the marching columns, but this, a peephole in a door, 2 marks on a table, an institutional cot, and a cold calculation turning a human being into a piece of meat. Oswald Pohl wanted efficiency. He got it. Himmler wanted control. He got it. The prisoners wanted to forget themselves. They got 15 minutes of the illusion of life. The women wanted to survive. They survived, but paid for it with their souls and their futures. This story teaches us that the abyss has no bottom, that any ideology, even the most inhumane, always crashes against basic instincts, and that the most terrible crimes are committed not in a fit of rage, but with a calculator in hand under the quiet scratching of a fountain pen. We are obliged to remember this, not to savor the details, but to understand. When the state begins to dispose of the bodies of its citizens for a higher goal, this is the beginning of the end of humanity. Look at your watch. 15 minutes. That is exactly how long this story lasted. For some, it is just the length of a YouTube clip. But for others, it was the price of life. Do not forget this.